And good afternoon, everybody. Chanel, are we good? I'm gonna add you back in. All right, I'm adding Chanel back in. We had to have a beverage run. Water glasses were empty, and it's very important to stay hydrated, especially when you're busy running your business. So, if you've not been here before, this is Business Acceleration Playbook, where we are bringing you the plays that you need to win in your business. And Angela Buckley will be joining us in a minute. She also had to run and grab a beverage. So, Angela, when you're ready, just give me the thumbs up and we'll add you back. Today, I have the beautiful Chanel Rose back with us today as co-host, and the beautiful Angela Buckley. Are you
Thank
good, Angela?
you.
I'm gonna add you. All right, Becca, there she is. Beautiful Angela Buckley co-hosting today as well. And we are going to be talking about niching in your business. And I don't know, is niching the proper way to say it? Because I butcher words with my accent, but I've always said niching, but I've also heard people say some way. I forgot what they say. What do you say?
Niche.
Niche? You say niche? That's
Niche.
a
No, niche.
lot.
I say
I say
niche, but
niche too. What do you
Yeah,
say, Angela?
niche. But I don't
Okay.
usually use it as a verb. That's kind of a newer thing, turning
Yeah,
nouns into verbs.
it is. It probably annoys you. I love it because there's no rules now. It's like everything's okay. I'm fine with that. So, but no, I think that, you are completely right. Yes, it's not a verb, but I do like using it as a verb. And so I will continue to do so, probably much to your dismay, this entire show. But I think it's important to talk about, how you are marketing yourself, who's your target audience, and for people that don't have any idea, this word that gets thrown around a lot. I feel like there's a lot of terms that get thrown around a lot in the business world now, that if somebody is newer getting into the business world, they may have a hard time keeping up with what the heck does that mean. And I think we kind of touched, maybe it was last week, on some of the acronyms even, and was I don't remember if it was on the show or another show that I did, but anyway, we did talk about it. And when I first started in the business world, I was like literally Googling acronyms because I was like, I don't know what this means. And I'm in there like, yeah, we're definitely going to do that. And I have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm like Googling acronyms. And I have a feeling that there's a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, if you're newer to that world, may have no idea what we are meaning when we are using the term, niche, or niching down your target audience and, whatnot. But I'm going to shut up for a minute, let Chanel jump in and tell you a little bit about her and quickly where you can find her. And then Angela, you can do the same. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty of the show.
well, hi, I'm Chanel Rose, and I'm your local favorite Airbnb host coach. Actually, I was really excited. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus. I like to be honest. COVID hit my family, and so we've been just adjusting to the impact of that. So I have been off for I think 3 weeks dealing with that, but I'm back. I did not have COVID, but like I said, it hit my family. But I want to talk to you guys about niching down specifically because even though we had a very rough few weeks, it didn't stop my business. It didn't stop my income. And I think it speaks volumes to the importance of, niching down, understanding your clientele and having systems in place for success. And if you're looking for me, you can find me mostly on Facebook. My name is Chanel Rose. If you look up Hello Chanel Rose, my main Facebook page comes up. If you are trying to DM me, that's the fastest way. I have an Instagram. It's Hello Chanel Rose. Not as active on there, mostly in the DMs. I post a lot of pictures of interior design, so fair warning. Not a whole lot of information available, but I will couch you to death over there. So if that's what you're
I
into,
will couch you to death.
I will. You should see my stories today. It's like 8 different couches in the exact same type of room. But I digress.
Wait a minute.
She's getting nosy. She's getting on Instagram.
And anyway, so
Continue.
I love interior design, and we'll talk a lot about how if you are a multi-passionpreneur, like the advantage and disadvantage of like figuring out what your niche is and trying to find a business that like it can lend itself to. And so that was Airbnb for me. Um, and yeah, I have a Facebook group. It's Airbnb for ambitious entrepreneurs. I changed the name a couple weeks ago, but that is officially the group. We're pretty active in there. Like I said, if you're looking for me, Facebook is pretty much where I am. I always say Chanel like the designer. and a rose like the flower. And that's who I am everywhere. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Don't look for me on TikTok. That's it. That's all I have. What about you, Angela?
Well, I'm busy over here looking for sofas. So you can find me, let's just start right there. You can find me at Creatively Efficient for some of my more business-oriented endeavors and mindset leadership coaching things. And you can also find me on Instagram at Angela J. Buckley. And you'll find a little bit more about my Alphorn wanderings and music. And somewhere in between both of those, you get my speaker activities. So if you ever need a speaker, I enjoy sharing all of my adventures and the lessons that we've learned along the way to collegiate primarily, but also high school and young professionals. So doing a lot of that work these days. It's a lot of fun. You can find me also on whatever, your standard LinkedIn, Facebook.
And I think those are perfect segues. Somebody's got to train. So, but I think those are perfect segues to talking about niching down, because you mentioned Airbnb, Chanel. You mentioned Alphorn. Those are obviously niches, right?
We are.
And I think it's funny. And I fell into this early on thinking that I needed to market to all the people, right? You start your business, you have $0. Let's be honest, you have less than $0 because you just started your business. You have like negative dollars. So, you just need all the money. So you make the mistake of thinking that you need to market to everyone and their brother, sister. And that's a huge mistake. And I can remember even in, the business world, hearing about, wanting to target down. I went to AMA for marketing. And of course, we talked about target markets and all that. But I didn't realize that was super important for me to do. And I think this is a very important topic for us to talk about today, because even somebody that came out of the marketing world, I understood target market, but the idea of really niching down and picking something super specific was still scary to me, because I needed all the dollars. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that make that mistake early on, because they're like, well, I can't niche down. I've had them say it to me. I can't niche down because I need as many clients as possible. And so I want to really talk about, maybe did Chanel, I'll ask you first, because I know the Airbnb is newer to you. When you decided to pick the niche of Airbnb, was that something you were nervous about scaling down to, or was it something that came easy because you had done it a few times at this point?
So I've done Airbnb in the past as like I don't know, like a passive sort of quick money grab. But was it a fear? I think that the hardest part, and it's something that I have a course, a 5-week mastermind. It's not really a course, a 5-week mastermind where I walk people through the correct steps for forming an Airbnb. I think the hardest part, and this happens a lot for people who aren't successful, is they don't have a brand for the Airbnb. And I'm not talking about like a website, which you can do all those things, but in your first Airbnb, you have to get really clear about who you want to attract, because I'm not a video gamer, but if your house is like a video game place, it's fine. But, or if it's for sports people or whatever, but a lot of times people just cram a bunch of furniture in a bunch of places and then they put it on Airbnb hoping to attract guests. And so what I knew based on what was around me was I have to come up with a cohesive theme throughout the house and then build around it. And so I think that all the time we talk about niching down, we don't have enough conversations about niching down in our products. We don't have enough conversations about niching down even in our messaging. And so what ends up happening is you say, I want to work with systems people like Angela. And so you just talk about systems. And the problem with being just focusing on systems, which is a niche, right? Because it's an important part of business. But if I'm a business owner, what systems? Why are systems important? Like, what is the outcome? And so I think for me, I knew very clearly that, I've been a coach before. I've worked in sales. I've done large investment sales before. I've ran political campaigns. So no one is more clear about you can't serve everyone than someone who's ran and won political campaigns. Because the reality is that a district in Chicago is like, 100,000 folks. It's statistically impossible to reach all of those people, even through TV, print, and mail and email. It's statistically impossible to reach every single person, right? And so you try to find what's most common around people and then build out on that. So was it hard? Initially, yeah, because there's this like I want people to like me thing that happens, I think, when you start a business. And so the problem of niching down is you want people to like you and to absorb whatever it is you're offering. But usually when it's your first business, you do a terrible job of attracting people because you don't really understand the necessity. And the example I've used with my clients in the past is, if you break your toe, are you going to call a neurosurgeon? Right? An orthopedics is a doctor, right? A surgeon, a neurosurgeon is a doctor. But in reality, you probably don't need a neurosurgeon to assess your big toe, right? Like, we understand in so many different arenas. If you want to get a patent because you came up with a really cool, what is that horn that Angela uses? Elk horn. Yeah, elk horn.
I always think of it like the Ricola horn.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not an Alcorn player, obviously.
Right. If you come up with a cool one of those, right, you're going to go to a patent lawyer. You're probably not going to go talk to your local divorce attorney, right? Yeah. Because while they're both attorneys, they serve very different purposes. And so even when you're niching down, and I was trying to figure out, like, do I want to go after busy professionals? Do I want to go after couples? Do I want to go after girls trip type of environments? Like, where in this world do I want to exist? And so for me, it was, I want to create, affordable luxury experiences. And so everything about my Airbnb screams affordable luxury, right? I use a lot of different tools to achieve that. I don't want to give out too much because I want people to come to my 3-day challenge. But once I figured out like affordable luxury was my happy place, I just started to think really clearly about, well, if affordable luxury is my mark, then maybe I don't use Dial soap. No offense, Dial. You can, we'll take your money. We'll advertise for you. Maybe I want to look for more of like organic soap, like little small things that may make a difference. And I don't offer Suave shampoo. I offer Tresemme, right? So like, it's just a different way of me always reinforcing the fact that like this is a home away from home experience, but the details are definitely important. So that was, yeah.
No, I think that's a perfect way of answering that. I'm all for the organic soap too, so that I digress. But I think that, picking, what you're passionate about, I think is always going to be the first step of figuring out how do you niche down. Because one mistake I've seen with people when they decide, niche, maybe they hear us talk today, they're like, that's it, I'm going to niche down. It's happening. So the mistake I've seen people make, though, is they try to niche down based on just the dollars alone, but there's no passion behind it. So they're like, I'm going to make more money over here by niching down with this sector over here, but they don't really have the passion behind it. So at that point in time, they're not going to be able to be as effective at niching down there. And if it's something that, you're passionate about. And I feel like I've got to know you well enough to know that, affordable luxury is probably something that you're super passionate about. And the fact that you just told us that you've got like couches all over your Instagram, that, that's probably something that brings you passion. I do want to have Angela, are you able to talk? You're muted. But Angela jump in and maybe talk. She's in, yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if you were
we've had trains and sirens.
Okay. Oh, you were the train. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm the train. I have a train right across the street here.
That's all right. You know what? It's a live show. That's how it goes. But now, I know that you've got a couple of things that you're also passionate about. What we mentioned Alcorn earlier, we ended up bringing that up as an example because I don't know anybody else that does Alcorn like in my whole life. So it's always usually a good example.
So I might be an example of niching so far down that it's kind of difficult to get much smaller.
Yeah. So you have like 3 people that can do it. And
hey, now we had 24 signed up for our last concert in Ohio.
That's a lot. And that's more people than I thought.
14 actually showed up. So, they actually took a picture with a drone.
Yeah.
Looking down on top of all of us because they couldn't get us all in the great shots. So 14 is a really, really big number in the United States. But yeah, okay. So niching. The advantage, I think, in particular with this instrument, first of all, it's unique. So it has an optic associated with it. So I'm only 5'1". My horn is 12 feet 8 inches. So when I'm walking around in stilettos, and I have stiletto hiking boots with my hiking dresses, like, not only are you offering something that's very unique, what we bring to it is also this combination of the education as well as the entertainment, right? So as a straight up, like, hey, let's go have a Saturday night concert, party all night long, we're not your only, there's other options. Where we are unique to the market really is that we can interface with young children, that we're bringing them into it, and we can as well interface with your party goers, but usually we're good for 30 to 60 minutes, not 3 to 5 hours, right? Like if you have a rock band, you're delivering something different. But the value that we have is we're able to bring entire families together with one instrument. And that is really hard to do, right? Like we have grandpas and we have little kids. On Sunday, I had a little 18-month-old dancing in front of us and her little dirndl. And I mean, it was just a farmer's market event, but never say just, because the money is good, the work is there, and the enjoyment was 100%. Like just the little girl dancing around it makes your entire week, right?
And I would say heritage plays into that, right? Not to interrupt you, but it was just, they hit my head. I'd say a lot of heritage probably plays into that, because I mean, it's not a common instrument that you pick up in band at school, or, not typical in your garage bands, so I'd say heritage, and I'm speaking because I have no idea, but I'm assuming plays a big role.
The heritage plays a big role. And then the other part of it that plays a big role is also kind of the stem, because it doesn't have any of the valves. So we're talking about a lot of science of how musical instruments work. So I bring in my engineering, right? So how do we tie in sort of, we use it as leadership conversations where we talk about the mindset of practicing and developing and finding your business part of, you have to breathe, right? You have to take a breath. So there's a physical element, there's a mindset element, there's a science element, there's an artistic element, and you can tie all of that into one big crazy instrument. But it's great because with that, you niche, you attract, you definitely engage, but then you can deliver your message on those topics, right? And for me, the passionate part is like, I'm allowed to be outside and making music and pulling all those people together. It's a little crazy, but it's become a vehicle for me to be able to talk about grit and passion and dedication, and that inch by inch work that takes place every single day. It requires the consistency, even as we talk about niching down, and even as Chanel was talking about understanding, like, let's make sure that the room and all the details tie in. Part of that is pipeline and niche, but part of it is the consistency to that vision. What she has in one Airbnb may not be the same style that she might have in another Airbnb. So how do you understand that consistency relative to your audience? So tying all of that, like, that's all, we get all of that in one crazy long instrument.
So, and I like that you brought in the fact of leadership. You brought in the fact of outdoors. You brought in the fact of engineering, because I think that's another thing that when people think that you're niching down, that you have to just be like this one person. So Angela's niching down. She's doing outboard. She's only going to talk about outboards all day long and nothing else. And that's not actually what it means. And I think that's another thing that people make the mistake of thinking when you niche down, you only talk about one thing. So I think a lot of times what it is that, to me, it ends up being like this way of building. It is, you're connecting with people based on one subject, which would be the outpouring, but you're able to build into maybe some other things that you're passionate about. Because let's be honest, we can have multiple, actually, I think it was Chanel that said multi-passionate, multi-passionate entrepreneurs. And I think that's a good way of phrasing it. But I think where the mistake is when you're multi-passionate in such a way that it's too chaotic and there's no focus and you have no idea who you're talking to, and the people have no idea, if you're talking to them, that it's them that they're talking to. So, but you can build other things in there. So Chanel can talk about coaching while talking about, Airbnb, while talking about her love of interior design, while talking about, being the money honey, all at the same time, and still be talking to one target area, but you're bringing your target in with one specific niche topic, which would be the Airbnb that Chanel is talking about, or maybe the outpouring that Angela is talking about. And I think that's a great way of really being able to explain to people that niching down doesn't mean removing all these pieces and that you're just this one, flat thing that you talk about. Because honestly, that's what I was afraid of, because, well, you two know me. I am far too ADHD to pick one thing to try to do for the rest of my life. I would rather die. But so, I avoided that whole thing. I was like, no, I'm not picking. I'm a rebel. And I actually think I've said that. I'm a rebel on it but I think it was more of understanding that you can niche down on a mastermind or a workshop or a conference or an offering or whatever the case may be. And you don't have to niche down your entire life till you just do the same thing day in and day out. Because honestly, that's the reason a lot of us got into entrepreneurship anyway, is because we're dreamers, we're visionaries, and we like to do different things. So that's kind of, again, I'll stop talking. But Chanel, you looked like you wanted to say something, or maybe.
Oh, no? Sorry, I was on mute.
You're good.
I was just agreeing with you. I think that, especially if you're just starting out, you just have to be patient with yourself. And you get a lot of really bad advice starting out, mostly because it's free. And so people say things to you that are very intimidating. Who do you serve? Do you have a value statement? Like, what's your mission, right? And the reality is that when you first start out, you tend to, whatever you were doing in your corporate career or your professional career, is what you immediately try to do in your entrepreneurship journey. And for some people that works out well, right? If you went to school to be a hairstylist and now you want to open up your own salon, obviously you're marketing those same skills. But a lot of times what you end up doing in entrepreneurship doesn't look similar to what you do and what you've been doing. So for example, I've never worked in a hotel. Fun fact, I probably applied to 100 hotel jobs, everything from front desk agent on to positions in HR, positions in community relations, DEI roles. I mean, literally from front office to all the way through corporate culture. And I have never, ever been able to get a job working for a single hotel. My passion had always been to be a hotelier. Like, I always knew that this was something I wanted to do. The truth is, working the way I was working, I'd probably never amassed the income to leverage as collateral to get the lease or the mortgage on a hotel. It just wasn't going to happen. And, they sell you this dream of exchanging time for money as the way to get what you need. The truth is, you have to make very calculated risk and constantly be in a stress phase of, risk, reward, worse risk, reward, right? Like, you have to just have the stomach for it. And so we talk about all the time, sometimes things work out really well and sometimes they don't. And I've shared this before and I'll share it here again for the person who is at work miserable and lonely and probably depressed and they don't even know it, because they become a functioning depressive because what they're doing is not providing them the results they crave. You need to know that if you are waking up unhappy, that you shouldn't be in that job. You need to know that you're right. You're being underpaid. You're being overworked. Those things that you feel, that instinct that is telling you that things are wrong, is true. And so much so, I firmly believe that sometimes, many times for me, my back had been against the wall. I just didn't have the confidence to take the leap. This last time, though, I was employed and not paid for 2 months. And by not being paid for 2 months, I was like looking at my savings going dramatically in the wrong direction. And I had told people before, like, oh, just Airbnb out your house if you lose your job. Like, you're sitting on perfectly the real estate, make some money. And so I was like, I'm going to take my own advice. And so I did it. And that first month, I doubled my corporate income, period. I was able to go from no income for 2 months, none, okay, because I was so stressed out about not getting paid, and I couldn't file for unemployment because I was still technically employed. And so, and nothing negative was happening between me and my employer. I just literally wasn't getting paid. It's a long story, but the point is, I told myself during that process of absolute desperation that I was never going to allow one person to pay me or not pay me. And that's the roof over my head. That's my car. That's whatever leverage that I've been, chasing. And so Airbnb, like I said, for 3 weeks, let me give you some perspective. So earlier this year, I was sick and my business did not run because I couldn't coach. And I didn't have an assistant or a co-coach or even a colleague who would absorb my business and run it for me without pay. Come on now. Nobody's going to do that, right? And so I just didn't have, again, I didn't get paid. And so thankfully, I still have my corporate job. Fast forward, I believe that things happen. They put your back against the wall and you decide who you are in those moments. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done waiting on this job that, I'm not getting paid. I'm done like staring down the barrel of a gun against my will, feeling like a hostage. I felt like sincerely, that's how I felt. And so I was like, well, what do I want to do? Because again, coaching, even high ticket coaching, you have to be in a room. And if you have ever been broke, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to not be getting paid. And if you are feeling underpaid and overworked, I'm sure you're exhausted all the time because not being paid your value is hard. It's misery. And so Airbnb came along and I was like, okay, I'm going to risk it all. And I sat down and I went in my house. I was like, okay, I need to fill these rooms up. I'm going to Airbnb. And it worked out for me. And so I always joke that like you just have to act when you have no safety net. And so that's where I was. And so the niche itself, it just became very clear to me that I had to do something. And I wasn't willing to do the same thing I'd been doing. I wasn't willing to exchange time for money anymore because that hadn't worked out for me in the past. I wasn't willing to take on 15 new clients because again, time and money have become the same thing and they're not true. That's just not true. There's infinite amounts of money and we have a finite amount of time. And so Airbnb has allowed me to create multiple streams of revenue for myself, not just from bookings with Airbnb, teaching other people how to do Airbnb, giving advice about interior design. And so I'm constantly in a position to figure out how many more ways can I make money through Airbnb so that I'm not having to be present. And then, it's the same thing with any niche, wherever you are. If you are, wanting to be a life coach, how do you, who do you want to life coach? And just get very honest with that. Like I remember one of my nights for the weekend is $375 a night, okay, which is on the higher end. And I remember putting $375 up and being like, no one's gonna book. Most of my weekends are booked for the rest of the year, right? No. And it's because the effort I put behind it matches my prices. And if I can encourage anybody to be, honest with yourself, if you're making money right now, people will invest in you. The niching down is less about other people and more about what you're willing to do. Because again, if I would have just said I'm going to go get another job, I'd have another job. I'd be making the same amount of money, maybe 2 or 3% more, but 2 or 3% more is not going to beat inflation. And I want to be able to retire one day, sooner than later, And so my ambitions had to match my output. And so I got really clear about the things that pained me, including I don't like getting up and going to work every day. This is a safe space. I'll be honest. I don't want to work every day. There are some days where I just want to lay down and, maybe wash my hair and get dressed and do nothing. I enjoy this. I know this may seem strange to y'all, but sometimes I just want to get dressed and do nothing. So, and I have to still though pay bills. And so if you're trying to figure out how to niche, don't start with your business, start with your personal life. What are the things that you just want to do, that you just crave? I can remember wanting to like wake up at 9 o'clock. That sounds strange. I was like, man, I wish I could just wake up at 9 o'clock. I could work till like 8 p.m. If I could just wake up at 9 or 10 and I do what's called a slow start in my morning. So when I got into business, I did not take appointments before 10 a.m. Like, just like as you're investing in your business and you're talking about niching, we don't talk about the personal niching that you need to do to be successful. Like, don't schedule 8 a.m. meetings. If you're not an 8 a.m. person, don't do it. Conversely, if you're not a 5 p.m., 4 p.m. person, don't schedule meetings at that time. You may feel like there's more money to be made, but it's not, because you'll just be miserable and tethered to this thing that doesn't bring you joy. And it'll probably be worse as an entrepreneur because you have to like work for the money versus like if with an employer, you can kind of, maybe coast until the 5 p.m. some days. There's no coasting in entrepreneurship. So instead of you negotiating the fact of going into work knowing you're not going to work all day, if you're not a Friday person, don't schedule appointments on Friday. Work longer on Tuesdays. Like whatever it takes, do the personal niching first. Because once you know what the value is for you, like the value add in your life first, then niching down and deciding I only want to help women named Angela or I only want to help women named Maria becomes, I mean, first of all, you'd still be rich because there are like a lot of Angelas and Marias in this world across all sorts of cultures. So you'd be A-okay. But before you decide that that's where you want to land, figure out what in your personal life. Do you want to be able to take your kids to school? Do you not want to take your kids to school? Also an option. Whatever it is, listen, I've heard things about the drop-off line that give me hives with the things that people do to try to be first, or in the pickup line. Like, whatever it is that brings you joy or creates pain for you, just you intrinsically, figure out those things first. And then the rest of it, it's crazy as it sounds, will start to take care of itself. Because then you realize, and then I'll stop. I know I'm on a tangent.
You're good.
But a good example. So I only help people who are available from like 9:30 on a good day, but typically like 11 to 3. So who are those people? Those are like mid-career professionals or higher who can pay more, right? Who have more control of their time, who can manage the fact that I can only handle them during the day, who are not looking for after work help. And it's not to say that people who require after work help do not have a big income. But what I am saying, though, is that my output is going to be different. My price point is going to be different, because I know that if we need to meet for an hour on Thursday mornings, you have to be in control of your calendar. And for the most part, early career professionals typically don't have control over their calendar. Even early mid-career professionals don't. But after you've been in your field for 12, 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, and so forth, you can say, I got to be out of here on Thursdays from 10 to 11, or I have a monthly doctor's appointment on whatever day. Like, those are the professionals that I work with, because I knew that I needed to be able to work during the day. What that also means, though, is that my price point is higher. So I don't really get the advantage of...
She vanished. She'll be back. No, she'll come back. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't get the advantage of doing more generic work, because the lower price point people need more of like a quick start guide. Yeah. I don't do as much of that because I don't have... Hey, Angela, welcome back.
Sorry.
That's okay. Happy to see you. I was like, uh-oh, she vanished. I've offended Angela. She quit on us. No.
I was hanging on your every word, and then you were just gone.
Well, no, I hope that this like helps people understand. But like my last and final thought is, I'm in that space, and so therefore, I know that my output has to be different. But I didn't understand that in the beginning, and so I was trying to shuffle $17 products for people who had multiple hours during the day free. They don't want what are you gonna say, Angela?
I'm 100% agreeing with you. And my first job first entrepreneurial adventure was a complete disaster, because I didn't understand everything that you are saying. So I met everybody on their time and their hours at 4 a.m. and 6 p.m. and every hour in between. And I ran myself ragged, and honestly, I made like no money. And then the second business that I opened, I made more money in like 1 month than I had made in 2 or 3 years put together in the first one, right? Like, learn from your lessons.
It's crazy.
It's crazy how setting those boundaries, and I didn't realize that was the thing. I just, like we were taught to go do, hustle. So I hustled, but I ran myself down.
Well, and I think it's important to kind of talk about, I think, Chanel, you said something about values, and it always comes back to your priorities, your values. And, I feel like I can say this now because I've started several businesses at this point. And like every time at the very beginning of starting a business, and I made a post about this a couple of weeks ago or a week ago or something, but every time I start something new, I go through this like newborn phase again of where I'm like, what the heck did I do? Because I've lost my balance for that moment. And I think it's important to say this because if somebody's out there listening and they just started their business and they're like, yeah, Chanel, I really want that balance. And it is hard to get it at the beginning. And I've done it numerous times. A lot of people that follow me know this. I just started a coffee shop. It's a new venture. I've never been a coffee shop owner before. It's doing great, but I'm learning as I go, and my balance is definitely not up to par at the moment. And Stacy was on here a minute ago, and she can tell you because she's the one that I whine to all the time, like But I mean, it's okay short term. It's going to come as long as you've got your values, there, your priorities are there. You know what you're wanting out of it. You've established your boundaries. You've established your own value, your own worth. You know what your worth is on things. That balance, you'll find that balance. The beginning phase is going to be a little bit hard. I think also, it was also you, Chanel, that said it early on about just the struggles of, kind of falling on your face. I don't remember how you worded it, but falling on your face here and there. It was like good and then bad and then good and then bad and then bad, good. And, that's how it is. I mean, anytime I've started anything new, I've had that same everything was so good, going smooth, and then Maria gets this like brain idea, ooh, it'd be so good to start a coffee shop. Let's do a coffee shop. And I do think it's a good idea, but I've had my moments exhausted, where I'm like, what did I do? Because I lost my balance for the moment. But short term, I've told myself it's okay. Now I did give myself a limit. It should be good by this date on where it can manage its own, I guess, life at that point, business life at that point. But, I do think it's important to kind of mention that because if you are a serial entrepreneur, or maybe you're somebody that's kind of going from, one niche and pivoting over to another, whatever the case may be, you're going to have those moments in the process of either pivoting or starting something new where it's not going to feel like you have a 100% balance. And I think it's always going to come back to asking yourself those questions on, what are my values? What do I need out of this? And making sure that you're adhering to it.
Yeah. You're right. But there are some days where I have like so much balance and so much authority. And then there are days where I'm like, it's 4:00. Like I've barely scratched the surface on the business needs. And I think sometimes, especially with this newer part of my business, like I'm expanding to 2 other cities in the next 30 days. And I think about like systems and like people like Angela who, live their life very organized and are full of like systems and processes for success. I am a no safety net kind of person. So like, I'm sure if Angela started an Airbnb, she'd have like these beautiful spreadsheets of like, what this costs, how much she can invest here and there. I was like, oh, this is my budget. Whatever it is, I'll stay within this budget. This is how much I want to pay. And I just kind of went with it. Right. And so over time, that's my skill set though. Like I would be an excellent crisis manager if I didn't, if I like to deal with other people's crises. I just don't.
Yeah.
But that is how I operate. And I build systems around it's not even chaos. I just build systems around my decisions. And so I say, this is what I want my budget to be. And then I work back and fill in what stuff costs. Right. And I know when my budgets are getting close to being met, and then I just adjust accordingly. And it's something I've started to teach people, especially with, Airbnb, or even like my coaching business. I am doing well, but there's no day that doesn't, cross my mind where I know that there's something I can be doing different, better, faster, right? And so when you talk about balance, that first 2 years is a lot of trial and error. The IRS doesn't even expect you to turn a profit the first 2 years in your business. And one of the things that I've learned is to be much more patient with myself, and I know people say that all the time, but in your niching down, you have to understand that there's going to be a lot of error and a lot of trial. But eventually, because at first you don't know when you're failing, because you just assume, people tell you things like, oh, businesses don't make money their first 2 years. This is the digital age. You literally market for free on your own platform. If you have a business that has no interest and is not making any money, there's something you're not doing right, period. Like your business, like maybe not the first 30 days, but at some point you should at least have some interest if you're putting forth the effort. And niching down allows you to pinpoint, hey, maybe I only like working with women, or maybe, only women are attracted to my offerings, or only men, like whatever that is. Like niching down is really just a process of building your brand in an attractive manner. Because I think that people always, they make it practitioner specific, and they make you feel like you control who you help. And I'd argue that when I first started my business, like my very first coaching business, it was just people who wanted to run for office. Share an example. Let's talk about the second business I started. There's no comparison between that. When I decided to do business coaching, I was like, oh, I want to only help women and like moms. And you know what was happening? I was posting. It was like overwhelmingly men. I was like, you are not a mom. Very specifically, I was looking for like the archetype mom, busy, or like women, like busy, young professional, like this very, like me. I'm not a mom though, but like just women. I wasn't attracting that at all. And I was still taking on clients, so I was frustrated. And I think it's because when I started asking people one simple question, what made you decide to want to work with me? And the response was like, it got me very clear about what I was sending out. And a lot of times it was just men thought I was pretty. But that's a conversation for another day.
That was what hit my head. I'm not gonna lie. So I was like, I know why they were checking you out.
Yeah. Listen. It took me a minute to figure out that like people will book the call, and we'll talk. We need to have a segment on that, like the people's ill intentions for
because they think it's like a date.
Yes, that's why my Calendly link is no longer available to people. And when people book me without my consent, I'm like, hey, who gave you this link? There's a vetting process, and I decline meetings, and because I'm like, who sent you, sir or ma'am? Because like all the time it happens where it's specifically we're off the subject again, but like we need to have a conversation on here one day about people's intentions and how to like better vet people to boundaries, or vetting. Absolutely. Because I think in the beginning you don't think you should vet people, but
I think it's part of the topic though, because if they're not, if you've decided your niche area, they're not in your niche. I mean, I think it's in the same topic.
It is. I just didn't know.
By default, when you niche down, you are turning away other opportunities in pursuit of your passion, your focus, and where you can best serve, right? So you're not saying, hey, I don't like you or something. What you're saying is, I believe there's a coach who can better serve your needs. And I'm going to serve my market with my skill set to the absolute best of my ability and allow this coach over here to do that for you.
Absolutely.
Or a better way of saying it, you only make yourself available to people who you know you can best help. Because I don't like turn down opportunity is probably like scaring the crap out of folks who are watching.
We're like, no.
You're right.
Yeah. Now, who is it that said the best definition of marketing is you're pushing away the people that are not from you while you're bringing in the people that are for you? I mean, I think that that's the way to look at it, is when you're marketing out in such a way, your people, the people that are for you, they're going to know it's them. They're going to be like, that's me. And they're going to be drawn to you unless they're the weird man that's just wanting to e-date Chanel. But again, we'll talk about that another day. But but other than that, I think it's one of those things that, people will be able to see themselves in it, and they'll be able to realize, hey, she can help me or he can help me, with this issue. And I think that's the importance of the idea of niching down, is it's for both parties, right? It's for, me as the entrepreneur to already know my vetting process, because I'm pushing it out there. And also, so there's a little more clarity and less of the vetting that's having to happen, because the people that are being drawn to you, they already know it's them. And I know I'm bringing it back to what your Airbnb, just because I know that's semi-recent. If somebody reads your group, they know what it's for. They're not like, I wonder what this is for, because it's right there in the title, super clear. They can tell it's for entrepreneurs that's interested in Airbnb. So it's super clear. They're not guessing and wondering. And I know, and I've been guilty of this as well, is I think of these like cutesy names, like, ooh, that's cute, but nobody knows what the heck that means except me. Nobody knows what it means. And so I make the mistake every once in a while, even still. I'll make it because I'll come with this name and I'm like super proud. I'm like, ooh, look at this. This is good. And until I have one of my team members, one of my friends go, what the heck does that even mean? And then I have to trace it back because, simple is always going to be best because there's clarity in it.
Yeah. And that's what attraction is, right? Like, if you've ever done online dating or you filled out an application, they ask you very specific things, like, where do you live? What's your birthday? How many years of experience do you have in this? List your job title and roles. Like, I think that we want to be different so often. And there is profits and similarity, right? And I use this example all the time. So Airbnb, one of the biggest pain points, I'll share this as vaguely as I can. One of the biggest pain points is fear of competition. And what I would say to anyone about competition is you want to be in the room with competition. The NBA wouldn't exist if they didn't play games against one another. The NFL wouldn't exist if they didn't play games against one another. It'd just be a bunch of guys on a local field. There would not be any income around that. There would not be, a certain skill level that we see. But those guys are together every whatever day, constantly, right? And they advertise, Bulls, Bucks, Raiders, Bears, whatever, right? Like, they don't ever say, oh, I don't want to be compared to this person. The best team and the worst team, they still football players, right? The best team and the worst team, they still play hockey. I don't understand hockey at all. That's why I don't reference
triathlon.
it. But say,
triathlon.
What'd you say, Angela?
She said triathlon.
Yeah, triathlon. It's like, yeah, like you don't want to. You go with people who have similar skill levels. I want to do a couch to marathon, right? I'm not running with Angela. As nice as I think she is, I'm not doing that. I'm not embarrassing myself. I don't want to slow her down, right?
I know how to do this. I know how to coach through that coach to 5K. Don't worry. I got you.
Right. She'd have to coach me. But I'm just saying, if I decide I want to run, I wouldn't just go pick my marathon runner friend and say, hey, let's run together. Our skill sets are not the same. I would get a coach, or I would find some program that suits my needs at the time. And that's what niching is. And you will find that there are couch to 5Ks. There are couch to marathons. The commitment level is different. The aggression towards the goal is different. And the reality is, like, it's the same thing with niching down. I know I just use sports, but it's the same thing. And when in any industry. And it's the same thing with doctors, right? Like we talked about, you won't go to a neurosurgeon if you have a toothache. I mean, you might, but you might not get that appointment. You may not get the results that you want. And it's not because they aren't qualified and they're not doctors or they're not a good coach. It's because you need to go where your people are. And so if you do an Airbnb, sure, you could be the lone Airbnb in rural Iowa. Okay. Right? But then, like, what's attracting folks to rural Iowa that your Airbnb is marketable to them? Is it going to be like the parents' getaway, the girls' night, whatever? If you want to be a systems person, there's some advantage of going to Silicon Valley, right? But maybe you stay in Ohio, for example, but you get certifications that people will notice, like, oh, you're Google certified, you're Facebook certified, and you align yourself so that you can market, right? Like, that's still niching down, but you want to be able to compete. So if you're a new entrepreneur and you're like, oh, I want to be I saw this group the other day, and I'm just a very curious person. So I joined it because I was like, oh, maybe this is for people who do vacation rentals. But it was the strangest title of a group, and it had like 19 people in it. And I don't even know what made me decide to join it. But inside of it was like a bunch of gems, like really, really helpful information. And I was like, it's not my business, so I shouldn't get involved. But I really wanted to message them and say, like, hey, you want to hire me as a coach? I think you have a great program. I just think that you are not marketing it to people who would ever want to purchase from you. And right on their Facebook group, they had, I mean, it was the most organized Facebook group, and it had been up for almost 2 years. And this person had just been posting, posting, posting with no growth. But that's the problem with not niching down, right? Because if you're very clear about being a football player or being a basketball player, then you do that really well. When Michael Jordan was playing for the B team for the Sox, he wasn't advertising for the Bulls, even though he eventually went back and played for the Bulls. The point is that, like, do what you're doing in that moment and do it really well. And niching down is about understanding that you might be a couch to 5K person. You might be a triathlete, right? Like, your goal might be triathlete, but maybe you want to start, you know, if you don't know how to swim, maybe you want to learn how to swim first, right? And like, that's what niching down is. It's teaching you, like, yeah, I can run, I can ride a bike, but I don't know how to swim. Well, don't go join the marathon program just yet if you can't swim, because the triathlon requires swimming, right? Like, that's what your niche does. It teaches you what you don't know, and it allows you to attract folks in your same ecosystem, if that makes sense.
So I think the challenge is how to niche down. Like, for example, you were talking about that disorganized Facebook group. So I don't know what one it is. How do you ask the right questions? If you're coaching someone, how do you ask them what is their target? Where are they trying to go? How do you help them identify the market so that they're niching down? And on the one hand, you have to niche down into an area. I can never get my hand into my computer screen. On the one hand, you have the niche, but on the other hand, you also have to have, like, you guys are more talented than I am. The other hand, you have to have a market that actually pays, right? So you need a little bit of both. You need to understand that you're niching into a market that has the money that you want to earn as well. How do you help somebody ask those questions?
So I think for me, and I'll let you answer in a second, but I think for me, again, it always goes back to the balance, because I'm looking at both sides of that and saying, yes, you want them to have money because you're doing this for money, unless you're in volunteer work, but let's assume that you're not, that you're doing it for money. So you want them to have the funds to be able to pay for it. But at the same time, I feel like I said earlier, you have to have the passion behind it, because if you're only chasing the dollar, I have watched that burn more people than anything. Just only chasing that dollar, like, oh, I'm going after this target market because they've got money, you know, and fill in the blank on what that sector is. But if it's only about the dollar, there's no passion involved with it, you are going to crash and burn. You're going to crash and burn hard. But also on the other side, if, you know, you're picking and I have a couple of, I was thinking, there's a couple of business, I guess, niche areas that it's definitely not a moneymaker. But also, I don't put that as my moneymaker. You know, I think sometimes there are things, like if you have multiple offers, maybe you have some that are your moneymakers, and then you have some that are your loss leaders. So when you're thinking about, you know, well, like my coffee shop, for example, I use that example because I used it earlier. I have loss leaders in that. There's things that make me more money, and there's things that, you know, I break even on, or maybe lose a little bit on, but I know it's bringing people in. So, you know, if you are somebody that ends up having kind of more than one offer, you know, you may have some that's bringing in the people, that's your loss leader, but you want to make sure that it is going to definitely balance out. So that's one thing I would say, and the passion has to be there. But Chanel, I'll let you go ahead and dive in and answer your side.
I guess, like, how do you figure out how to ask the right question? There's so many great ways to network with folks. And I think that, not to be the Debbie Downer in the room, but the pandemic really, really created access to people in a way that did not exist. You know, people are used to doing virtual meetings now. They are accustomed to flexibility. They're accustomed to maybe your kids in the background crying, so you go pick them up and bring them, and you lay them on your lap, and they can see your hand petting their head to soothe them. Like, we live in this world now that is, in the best possible way, made us more connected. And because of that, I think that people are less reluctant to be helpful. Step one, what is your niche? So maybe you want to do masterminds, like you firmly believe in getting folks in the room who can help one another. There are mastermind groups on Facebook. There are people who specialize in masterminds on LinkedIn. Maybe you do business to business sales. I mean, I guess I am a straight from the hip, not afraid of a cold call kind of person. Get an email that you can believe in and email people and say, hey, I'm doing a survey. I just want 15 minutes of your time to understand what your business needs are. I don't want to sell you anything. Maybe down the line, I'm looking to help, have some clients, but I really just want to know, what are your needs? Posting on different Facebook groups. People love to talk about themselves. So you can ask, what's your biggest pain point about customer service in your business? And people will say it's hiring. People will say, oh, well, I just don't do it because I don't have enough time, or I don't have great customer retention. And so you'll go from no ways to provide solutions to 15 different options of where you might want to go meet. The truth is that most of the time, if people want to sit down and tell you what their pain point is, they're probably willing to at least pay to figure out how to solve it. And then you decide, do you want to be like a Stacy, where you come in and you train people so you take the pressure off of the business owner, or do you want to just provide trainings that are a la carte that people can serve themselves, right? So like, it's a matter of reaching out. You got to be vocal. I can remember not ever wanting to post about my business on Facebook. Now it's like 85% of what I post about. I tell people that I have sales. I tell people that I have Airbnbs. I tell people that, my coaching is coming and it's going to have to be paid for. And I don't shy away from the fact that, people need your help. And so you have to put yourself in a position to help people. And how do you do that? You literally ask those same questions. What are your needs? There's probably a Facebook group. If you want to help moms of children with special needs, I guarantee you there's a group or a dozen out there on Facebook. If you want to help, for me, like my hair's dyed blonde, so I experience some breakage sometimes. If you want to help people with like preventing hair breakage, there are hair care groups out there. Like, your niche exists and they're waiting on you to ask them what they need. And then you should always build your products around their needs, always. So you should not just be putting stuff out because you think what's best. It'll never sell. Take it from me. It'll never, ever sell, ever. But if you ask people what they want and what they need, it'll fly off the shelves every time.
No, I think that's good. And I think you said that very passionately, which goes right back to making sure that you've got, because you have to understand it. You have to have passion behind it to really drive it. And people will, well, you mentioned special needs kids. I do have a special need kid, so I can tell you from, experience, a lot of the trials, that you go through on trying to just manage life with a special needs kid, more or less businesses. So I think that, anything that you could think of that you've gone through in your own personal life, like if you're sitting here right now and you're like, okay, well, what can a niche be? Think about your own pain points to getting to where you are in your business now. Maybe you are still working your 9 to 5 and you kind of got your side hustle. Maybe you're just thinking about your side hustle, or maybe you've already quit your job and it's your primary income now. No matter where you're at, think about the problems that you face getting to this point that you're at right now. How did you overcome them? Because I think a lot of times we try to overcomplicate it in our mind. And if we think back to what we did wrong and what we did right, if you can teach other people how to do it the way that you did it right, and they can hop, skip, and jump over the things that you did wrong, people will pay for that. That's what they're paying for. They're paying to not fall on their face the 10 times that you fell on your face to get to that, the way that worked. And I think that's what people need to think about when they're trying to craft their own niche down. It doesn't have to be complicated. I think sometimes we try to make it super complicated.
I agree.
Yep.
So I know we are at 2:02 because we're all windy. But the Angela, do you have anything else that you want to say? Chanel, either of you?
I think you have to adjust and adapt. So as you're niching down, make sure that you're asking all the questions that Chanel identified. Make sure that you are always asking the question, is this niche the direction that you want to be going in? Is it going to help you achieve your personal goals as well? Because only as you achieve your goals are you going to be able to help the people that you're really in business to serve. and then just kind of keep on keeping on. That persistence, that small, slow, daily, that consistency is really what matters. If you need help with the mindset on that part of it, I gotcha.
Awesome. Chanel, you have anything else you want to add?
Nope, just join my group, Ambitious Airbnb for Ambitious Entrepreneurs. I'd love to see you.
All right, awesome. So we will be back again next week at 1 p.m. for another episode of Business Acceleration Playbook. And thank you, ladies, for joining me today. And you can catch the replay on YouTube, on Facebook, but also you can catch it on Roku Thursdays at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch us out there, you can. And make sure you click like, click share, because that's what we're here for, is to help all the entrepreneurs and small business owners out there, to help them win in their business. So Thank you, and see you all next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.